welcome to the ARMA International web seminar titled Grant Thornton Presents SharePoint plus Next Page.
Great. Yeah, Sydney, this is Scott here again. We do have some questions, so if you want, I can go ahead and read you some of these. The first one is, how did you manage file planning, file classification? Was there a need to create a master plan before rolling out SharePoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing I did not mention in the context of C3, which actually is a fairly integral part of our overall ECM initiative here at the firm, has to do with how we manage paper documents in file rooms as well as electronic documents. So much of what I discussed actually centered around the electronic side of the world. We, in parallel to that, are also going through a process to incorporate both policy as well as technology inside our file rooms to incorporate similar interwoven technology actually that's integrated with our electronic interwoven worksite implementation. So we've got a single source of management of all of that content. So to answer your question, yes, we did have to go through, one of the first things we did as part of our ECM initiative was to build out a strategy and a roadmap, and one of the first items on that roadmap had to do with taxonomy and file plan. So we did actually go through that process. We tried to find some good balance, because for those of you familiar with taxonomy development and file plan development efforts, those can get pretty crazy and out of hand, particularly in diverse organizations such as ours, where we've got lots of different service lines that do business very differently. So we tried to find a good balance of getting enough structure in place from a file plan and a taxonomy perspective to enable us to move forward on the project, but to keep it as simple as we possibly could. So the short answer to the question is yes, we did do that, although we tried to minimize the complexity of that, and so far that seems to be working for us fairly well.
Great, thanks, Sean. Got a few more questions here. Does NextPage have any dependency on where the document is created? An example, in SharePoint on the desktop, legacy ECM system, and is there an integration story with records management?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I actually saw a number of other questions that are related to this one. So the NextPage tracking platform does not require SharePoint or a centralized system, just in general. It does do integrations with any of those, and there's many ways that tracking can happen. So, for example, there is, just to know how it works a little bit, it does have agents. It does get installed on those machines. And so as anything's created or happening, it's just this running behind the scenes doing its GPS tracking thing, so that at the moment you need to take action, you can target that action and take action on those documents. And there's a number of different ways that tracking can occur. It can happen in the Grant Thornton way. It's happening because everything's passing through SharePoint. So it's automatically getting tracked from there, and then no matter where it goes. But from the desktop itself, it can also just get tracked. And so say I create a document or I save a new document, it gets tracked or tagged. And then as it just makes its way throughout its life, I email a copy to 10 people, they send it back to me, I save it to a shared drive, I put a copy in SharePoint. We call it the digital thread. And that's some unique technology that NextPage has that ties all documents and derivative work together, so that when you need to take action, you need to go through and clean up, it knows that this one document happens to have 100 permutations. And it can say, yep, we're going to save final, and we're going to destroy the rest. And it will do that across any of those distributed locations, because it's not a repository. It literally is this tracking element across all of those. So whether you have a centralized repository that you're archiving, you're using SharePoint, or you're just using shared drives, it does that across all facets of an enterprise. And it doesn't have a dependency on any specific one.
Great. Sydney, there was a second part to that question. I'm not sure if you answered in there, but is there a way to push out the NextPage client to all users in silent mode?
Yeah, there is a way to push it out in silent mode. And interestingly enough, really depending on the use case of the organization, depends on the deployment side, So in some cases where cost of storage has been a major driver, they're actually pushing the client out so that they can see exactly how many documents are out there and be able to execute even cleanup policies. For example, we want to go find all documents that are older than 3 years, and we want to target those and make users make a decision on whether or not those need to be archived or destroyed. And they want to know total file size of all of those documents and location, and then enable business policy based on those. So, and in some cases, it's just going out there and it's silently gathering all that information, bringing it back to the enterprise, and then the enterprise will make decisions on how to have users behave.
Okay, excellent. Another question is, why do you use interwoven for content storage versus MOS, and what value did it bring that justified the complexity and increased cost?
Yeah, that's a great question. We to give you some context, it's probably important to understand that when we started this process, MOS 2007 hadn't been released yet. So we were evaluating ECM platforms at the time, which included many of the major vendors that you'd expect to see on a list like that. We did bring Microsoft in as well, and frankly, we evaluated based on what we were told was coming with MOS 2007, but it was a couple of months away from being released. And frankly, from what we saw and from inside kind of industry sources, we knew that in particular, the records management capabilities around legal holds and retention policy and kind of that core kind of records management capability was very early release in MOS 2007 and lacked some of the capabilities that we were really looking for. So we adopted Interwoven Worksite as well as Interwoven's records management product specifically for the archival and the management of our kind of final firm work papers. Over time, is it possible that MOS kind of becomes more competitive in that space? I think that's entirely possible. Certainly at the time when we made that decision, we felt fairly comfortable that we were justified in leveraging SharePoint for kind of in-process document management, that lightweight document management that takes place on a day-to-day basis, but for the purposes of locking our documents down, applying retention policy, supporting legal holds, all of those sorts of things, we felt confident that we needed a more enterprise-class records management platform to do that.
Great, excellent. Another question is, how is duplication determined? At what level? File name only, or exact matching of hash, version controls, etc.?
Yeah, so the tracking of the documents is actually happening via hashing. And there's some fairly sophisticated algorithms that understand duplication and the relation of documents to each other. So we are taking the hash of the documents, and then we do understand exactly how all of those are related. Are they an exact copy, i.e. is it a duplicate? Is it a new version of that document? Is it a new version in a different location? Is it the same document in a different location? And we tie all those together via, we call it the digital thread, in order to do that. And so it understands all of that. So in some cases, I've got clients who say, okay, inside of a display, I want for that display to highlight for users all copies, they call them convenience copies, all copies of documents that they have on their machine that are also in the centralized archive, so that they know and we know that those are documents that they're okay to keep, but that were, say, final deliverables for a specific client. I also, just so you know, we have a ton more questions that I know we won't get to. I did put my email address on the screen, and I am happy to have anyone email me and we can answer any direct questions offline also, in addition to trying to answer the ones that are in the queue.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, we are running up on time here. Do you want to try and squeeze one more in, or should we close this out, Sydney?
I think we're right at our time,
okay.
And we can get. We will answer. We are happy to answer all of the rest of those questions offline.
All right, fantastic. Well, with that said, I'd like to just take a second to point everybody towards the ARMA International Online Bookstore for the resources you need to better manage your records and information. You can find that online at arma.org/bookstore. Again, it's arma.org/bookstore. I'd also like to give out a big thank you to our speakers today, Sean Ivey of Grant Thornton and Sydney Tetro of NextPage. Thank you very much, guys. You did a great job. And I'd like to thank our audience for coming in and listening to us today and giving some great questions. And let you all know that you will be receiving an email in the next week or so with access to the presentation as well as the webinar replay. So thank you to all, and with that concludes today's event. Take care and have a good day.